The ink on the sale agreement was barely dry when my phone rang. I was still sitting at the closing attorney's conference table in Columbus, $4.8 million. 26 years of my life. Norris Industrial Medical Supply, gone with a signature. The buyer's team was packing up their folders. My hands were still a little unsteady when I picked up. It was Philip. Gerald. His voice was bright. Too bright, heard the news. Congratulations, brother. Thanks, Philip. So listen, when do you think you'll be ready to sit down and talk about things? What things? A pause. Just long enough to tell me everything. Well, family things, you know. There's a lot of people who've been there for you over the years. I sat there in that conference room, $4.8 million richer, and felt something go cold in my chest. My name is Gerald Norris. I'm 57 years old. I built a medical supply manufacturing company from a rented warehouse and a used forklift, and I just sold it. My wife Beverly passed 3 years ago. I have one son, Owen, 28, an HVAC technician, and 2 siblings who only seem to remember I exist when there's money on the table. That phone call was the beginning of everything that followed. Let me back up a little. Philip is my older brother, 61 years old. He runs a mid-sized construction contracting business out of Dayton that has been almost turning around for about a decade. Over the years, I lent him money when he needed it. $40,000 here, $60,000 there. Once $30,000 because a supplier was going to pull his license. It added up to $190,000 total. He never paid back a dime. Every time I brought it up, he would get quiet and remind me how he was the one who stayed behind when our parents were sick, how he sacrificed his own opportunities so I could go to college, how the family would have fallen apart without him. He said it so many times to so many people that I think he started to believe it himself. Here's what actually happened. I took out loans to pay for my own education. I worked nights and weekends through school. I borrowed from a credit union, not from Philip. He did not give me a single dollar, but he built that story over 20 years and told it to every cousin, every aunt, every neighbor who would listen. By the time I sold my company, half the family believed Philip had put me through college with his own hands. My sister Diane is 53. She lives in Cincinnati with her husband Neil, who sells insurance. I helped them with a down payment on their house, $38,000. I paid 2 years of their daughter's college tuition, another $27,000, around $65,000 total. She sent me a fruit basket at Christmas one year and considered the matter closed. Beverly used to tell me, Gerald, your family loves the idea of you more than they love you. I did not want to hear it back then. I told her she was being too hard on them. She was right. She was almost always right about people. After the closing, I drove home alone and sat in the living room for a long time. The house felt bigger without Beverly in it. It always does. I looked at her photograph on the shelf and thought about what she would have said about all of it. Probably something short. Probably something I would have needed to sit with for a few days before it hit me. I thought about Philip's call. I thought about the one from Diane that would come next. I thought about $255,000 that had drifted from my accounts into theirs over the years, money that somehow became gifts in their memory, even though I had called them loans every single time. And I made a decision. I called Howard Vance. He has been my attorney for 14 years. Estate work, business contracts, the whole picture. He is steady and sharp, and he does not get excited easily, which is exactly what I needed that night. I told him what I wanted to do. He was quiet for a moment. Gerald, if this goes the way you're thinking, you cannot take it back once it starts. I know, I said. That's why I'm calling you first. We spent 2 hours on the phone working through the details. The plan was straightforward. Howard would leak the story through a mutual cousin named Art. Art is the kind of man who has never met a secret he could keep for more than 48 hours. We would feed him one piece of information and let him do the rest. The story was this. Gerald made a bad investment, a medical tech startup he believed in, lost $3.6 million in 8 weeks, still had the house, still had some savings, but the big money was gone, just like that. I stopped driving my truck and started using Beverly's old Civic. I let the lawn go a little. I stopped getting my hair cut on schedule. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to look like a man who had taken a serious hit and was not quite holding it together. Then I waited. Philip did not call for 5 days. I know he heard the news because Art confirmed it within 24 hours. Philip knew. He just chose not to pick up the phone. On day 6, I called him myself. Yeah, I heard, he said. His voice was flat. None of that warmth from the closing day call. That's rough, Gerald. What are you going to do? I'm trying to figure that out. I might need some help for a few months, just to get stable again. A long pause. Gerald, I've got my own situation right now. The Dayton project is behind schedule and I'm stretched thin. I can't be taking on other people's problems. Other people's problems. That is what he said. I was his brother of 57 years, and he called me other people's problems. I understand, I said. I'll figure something out. He said good luck and hung up. 3 days after that, Art called me. Not to gossip this time, but because he felt bad about it. He told me Philip had organized a family gathering. Cousins, aunts, a couple of older neighbors who had known our parents. He did not invite me. The topic was how to protect the family's collective interests, now that Gerald had proven he could not manage money. Philip told everyone I had always been reckless. He said Beverly used to be the steady one, and now that she was gone, I was off the rails. He used Beverly's name. He pulled my dead wife into a story he made up to cover himself. I sat with that for a while. I almost called Howard and told him to cancel everything. I almost decided that none of it was worth the effort, that I should just accept what my family was and move on. I was tired. It had been a hard few years since Beverly passed, and sometimes the fight goes out of you, but then I thought about $190,000. I thought about every time Philip called me with a problem and I picked up. I thought about Beverly telling me years ago, quiet and matter of fact, that Philip would always take as long as I kept giving. I thought about how I told her she was wrong. I did not call Howard to cancel. I called him to say keep going. Then came the text from Philip. I still have it on my phone, Gerald. You know I've sacrificed a lot for this family over the years. I hate to bring this up given everything, but I've got a contractor in Dayton who needs payment by Friday or the whole project collapses. I need 45 kilopule. You still have the house equity. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. He sent that 4 days after telling me I was other people's problems. He did not ask how I was eating. He did not ask where I was sleeping. He went straight to $45,000. Diane called 2 days later. Her voice had that careful tone people use when they think they are being kind but are actually just protecting themselves. She said she had heard what happened and she felt terrible. Then she said she hoped I understood that she and Neil were in no position to help financially right now. Then she said, and I remember this exactly, Gerald, maybe this is a chance to simplify your life. You always carried so much. I thanked her and got off the phone. What I did not know yet was what she had already said to others. Howard had a contact, a cousin on our mother's side, who told him that Diane had been telling the family I had always acted like I was better than everyone because of the company, that this was good for me, that it would teach me some humility. This from the woman I gave $65,000 to without ever once asking for a thank you. There was one more thing Diane did that I did not find out until later. She called our mother, who is 81 and lives in a care facility outside Columbus, and told her that Gerald had made some bad decisions and the family was worried about him. She framed it as concern. What it actually did was send our mother into 3 days of anxiety that her caretakers had to manage. When I visited that week, my mother held my hand and kept asking if I was going to be all right. Diane did that. She took my fake crisis and handed it to an 81-year-old woman with a heart condition because it made Diane feel like the responsible sibling for once. That was the moment I stopped having any doubt about what I was doing. I drove to Lancaster on a Thursday evening. Owen's rental house is on a quiet street. Nothing fancy, a small yard with a tire swing he put up for the neighbor's kid. I pulled up in Beverly's Civic and sat outside for a few minutes. I almost drove away. Not because I wanted to cancel the plan, but because I knew what I was about to do to my son. I was going to walk through that door and let him believe his father had lost everything. Owen had never once given me a reason to test him. He did not deserve to be scared. I sat in that car for 10 minutes. Then I thought about what I had heard from Philip and Diane over the past 2 weeks. I thought about what Beverly always said. And I thought about the fact that one day I would be gone, and Owen would be the one left dealing with this family, and he needed to know the truth about them before that happened. I got out of the car and knocked on the door. Owen opened it. He looked at me, looked at the Civic, looked at my face, and did not say a single word. He just opened the door wider and stepped back. "Come on in, Dad," he said. I told him the story, the same fake story I had been carrying for 2 weeks. The bad investment, the startup, the $3.6 million gone in 8 weeks. I told him Philip had gone silent and then called me other people's problems. I told him Diane had suggested this was good for me. I told him I had nowhere else I felt right about going. Owen sat across from me at the kitchen table and listened to the whole thing without interrupting once. Patty stood near the counter, arms crossed, not out of coldness, but the way people stand when they are paying close attention. When I finished, Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How much do you have left?" "Enough to get by for a little while," I said, "but I need somewhere steady." Just for a few months. He did not look at Patty. He did not excuse himself to talk it over. He said, "You're staying here. That's done. We'll figure the rest out." Patty nodded once. "We have a pull-out in the spare room. It's not much, but it's comfortable." I told them I did not want to put them out. Owen looked at me the way Beverly used to when I said something she considered not worth responding to. "Dad," he said, "stop. They gave me the spare room." Patty made up the pull-out herself and put a lamp on the side table and a glass of water on the nightstand, like I was a guest at a real hotel. Their daughter, 2 years old, toddled in and stared at me for a while and then handed me a plastic dinosaur and walked back out. I held onto that dinosaur for a long time after she left. I could not sleep that night. The house was quiet, but my head was not. I kept going over everything. The closing table, Philip's voice, the text message, Diane on the phone to our mother, the 10 minutes I sat in the Civic outside before knocking. Then I heard them in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep. Owen and Patty were keeping their voices low, but the house is small and the walls do not hold much back. Patty said, "We need to talk about what happens if this goes longer than a few months. Medical stuff alone could get expensive fast." Owen said, "I know. I've been thinking about it since he got here." "He looks thin," Patty said. "I want him to see someone, a real checkup. Not just him saying he's fine. He'll fight us on that. Then we don't ask him. We just schedule it and tell him we're going." A pause. Then Owen said, "There's the truck." Patty did not say anything right away. I knew what the truck meant. It was a 3-year-old Ford Fi-250 he had saved for over 2 years. He used it for work, hauling equipment to job sites. It was not a luxury. It was how he made his living. "That's your work truck," Patty said. "It's worth around $14,000. Maybe a little more if I find the right buyer. That covers a few months of whatever he needs. Doctor visits, prescriptions, whatever comes up." Another pause. "I can carpool with Danny from the shop," Owen said. "It's not that far," Patty said. "Okay, just like that. No long discussion, no list of reasons why it was a bad idea." She said, "Okay." Owen said, "You sure? He's your father," she said. "He came here because he had nowhere else to go. That means we're what he has. So yes, I'm sure. Call the dealer tomorrow." I lay in that pull-out bed and I did not move for a long time. I was 57 years old, and I had spent the last 26 years building something I thought would mean something. And in all that time, I had given money to people who never once said thank you and quietly kept my distance from the one person who apparently would have sold his work truck without blinking. I called Howard at 5:30 in the morning. I went outside so Owen and Patty would not hear. "It's done," I said. "Whatever you need to do, do it." Howard did not ask questions. He had been waiting for that call. He spent the next 10 days pulling records. Every wire transfer to Philip going back 11 years. Every payment to Diane's account. Bank statements, confirmation numbers, dates, amounts. $190,000 to Philip. $65,000 to Diane. $255,000 total. All of it documented down to the penny. Then we moved to the second part. I met Philip for coffee in Dayton. I told him I had found a way to pull some equity from the house, and I might be able to help with his $45,000 after all. His whole posture changed when I said that. The wariness went out of his shoulders. He got friendly again, the way he always did when he thought something was coming his way. I told him the bank required documentation of any existing informal loans before releasing funds for a new transfer. "Standard procedure," I said, "just a formality." I slid a 1-page acknowledgement form across the table. It listed the full history of what he had borrowed from me going back to 2013. Philip looked it over for about 20 seconds. He signed it. He had just put his name on a legal document acknowledging $19,000 in outstanding personal debt to Gerald Norris. He thought he was signing a formality to get $45,000. What he actually did was hand Howard everything he needed. I drove back to Lancaster that afternoon and sat in the driveway for a while before going inside. Owen was in the backyard fixing a section of fence. He waved when he saw me, just a regular wave, the kind a son gives his father when he comes home. I thought about what Beverly would have said if she could see all of it. I think she would have just said, "Told you so." Howard called Philip and Diane the following Wednesday and asked them to come to Owen's house. He told them Gerald wanted to talk. He did not say anything else. They both showed up on Saturday morning. Philip arrived first, parked his truck in the street, and walked up to the door with the careful look of a man who does not know what he is walking into but has decided to act like he does. Diane came with Neil, who stood slightly behind her the whole time and did not say much. Owen and Patty sat on the couch with their daughter between them. Howard stood near the window with his briefcase. I stood in the middle of the room. I kept it short. I have never been a man who needs a lot of words to say something. There was no bad investment, I said. The company sold for $4.8 million. I have every dollar. I made up the story because I needed to know the truth about this family before I did anything else with that money. Philip's face went through several things very fast. Confusion first, then something close to anger, then a calculation that I recognized immediately because I had seen it my whole life. He was already figuring out how to reframe this in his favor. I did not give him the chance. I told them what I had seen. The 5 days of silence after the news broke. The phone call where he told me I was other people's problems. The family meeting he organized behind my back where he used Beverly's name to make himself look like the reasonable one. The text message asking for $45,000 4 days after he told me he could not help. Then I looked at Diane. I told her about the call to our mother. About the 3 days of anxiety it caused. About sitting with an 81-year-old woman who was squeezing my hand asking if I was going to be all right because her other daughter had called to tell her Gerald was falling apart. Diana started to say something. Howard put one hand up, politely, and she stopped. Howard opened the briefcase. He laid out the bank records on the coffee table. 11 years of transfers to Philip, the full history of payments to Diane. Every date, every amount, every confirmation number, $255,000 total, documented completely. Then he produced the acknowledgement form Philip had signed in Dayton. Philip stared at it for a long moment. I watched him understand what it was. Howard explained the legal position in plain language. The signed acknowledgement made the $190,000 a formal legal obligation. The documented transfers to Diane established a clear pattern of financial support that had never been repaid or acknowledged as gifts in any written form. A repayment schedule had been prepared for both of them. 5 years, structured payments, reasonable terms. If either of them chose not to follow the schedule, Howard would file civil claims in the appropriate courts. He was not threatening. He was just explaining how things stood. The room was quiet for a while. Philip said, "You set me up. I asked you a question." I said, "You answered it." He did not say anything after that. Diane cried a little. I do not think it was entirely for show. I think some part of her understood what she had done and felt it. Neil put his hand on her shoulder and kept his eyes on the floor. I turned to Owen. I told him everything, the truck conversation, the 5:30 in the morning phone call to Howard, the fact that he had been ready to sell his work vehicle for a father he believed had nothing left. Owen shook his head slowly. "Dad, you didn't have to do all this." "I know," I said. "I wanted to." Howard drew up the trust documents that afternoon. $900,000 in a structured trust for Owen and Patty, set up to cover their daughter's education, a house, and a foundation they could actually build something on. The house was already handled. I had bought it outright 2 months earlier during the planning stage, after a conversation where I had casually asked Patty what kind of neighborhood she would want to raise kids in. She thought we were just talking. She did not know I was listening the way a man listens when he has already made up his mind. Owen held the keys for a long time before he said anything. When he finally spoke, all he said was, "Beverly would have liked this." He was right. She would have. That was 2 years ago now. Philip has made every payment on schedule. We do not talk often. When we do, it is civil. I'm not looking for an apology, and I'm not holding a grudge. I just know what I know, and I act accordingly. Diane sent a card last Christmas. It said she was sorry. I believe she means it, even if she is still working out exactly what she is sorry for. That is her business, not mine. Owen and I opened a small shop together last spring, medical equipment repair and refurbishment, 8 employees, nothing flashy. I know the industry. He knows how systems work. Some mornings I drive over early and we have coffee before anyone else arrives. We do not always talk. We do not need to. Beverly used to say the best part of building something was not the thing itself. It was knowing who you built it with. The first company I built to prove something to myself. This one I'm building to leave something behind. That is the difference. It took me 57 years to get there. If any part of this hit close to home, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment and tell me your story. Not everyone gets a clean resolution. Some of us just get clarity, and sometimes that is enough. Share this with someone who is still figuring out who is really in their corner. And if you have been the Owen in someone else's story, the one who shows up without being asked, without calculating the cost, I want you to know that it does not go unnoticed. It never does. The people worth keeping always remember who was there when the room got quiet.